Look out of the window with all my heart, but I'll find love in the same soul and fall apart. Maybe we can be something new. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us to be something new? Follow where the wind blows and see the heights. They watch to let go, taking the sights. Maybe we can be something new. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us to be something new? All honesty, we're slipping off slowly, so hold on to me. All honesty, we're slipping off slowly, so hold on to me. Be some. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us? Oh, 'cause I'm ready for you, ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us? Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready, ready, ready? Are you ready for us? We can be something new. All honesty, we're slipping off slowly, so hold on to me. All honesty, we're slipping off slowly, so hold on to me. Be some. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us? Oh, 'cause I'm ready for you, ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us? Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready, ready, ready? Are you ready for us? We can be something new.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening for a safe return to judo. And this webinar is aimed specifically at parents or carers tonight, or guardians. And before I hand over to the panelists who will present a safe return to judo tonight, I'd just like to give you a wee bit of housekeeping around how the webinar will work. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a Q&A box. This is for any questions that you may have this evening. I will do my best to answer them online. However, there'll be an opportunity at the end to answer specific questions live. In terms of the questions, if you can make sure that they're brief, because unless they're brief, it'll be really difficult to read and to digest this evening, but we will get back to you if you have any sort of larger questions at a later date. During the webinar itself, there'll be a couple of polls just to get a feel of where you are at the moment and how you feel about your children going back to judo. It's been a difficult time for everybody with COVID-19 and some of you may have some concerns around that. But hopefully when we discuss the guidelines tonight, it will alleviate some of the fears that you may have. British Judo are doing all they can to make sure that the clubs will be as safe as possible to welcome your children back as soon as we can, as soon as we get the government and update our draft documents to go out to everybody. So the panellists tonight will be Nick Shepherd, he's the British Judo's National Development Officer, and Joanne Baggs, who is head of our project development. And for those that don't know me out there, I'm Joyce Heron, BJ's Deputy Sports Director. So I'll hand you over to Nick.
Thanks, Joyce. So the purpose of tonight's webinar is to just give you a little bit more information and just give you a little bit more confidence about returning to judo with your child. So we're going to start off with a couple of questions, as Joyce mentioned, just to get a bit more of a flavour for who we've got on the webinar this evening. So the first couple of questions I'm going to ask is, what role best describes you? And also, on a scale of 1 to 5, rate how comfortable you feel about your child returning to judo at the moment. So the polls should come up on the screen very shortly. So if you just want to wait for them to come up and then select your answer for each question, and then we'll have a look at the results just to get more of a feel for what the general feeling is out at the moment. So the questions should be up on your screen now. That's great, they're all coming in. And don't forget question 2 as well, if you haven't answered that one yet. Okay, last couple to vote. Should be one more person if they're going to. Okay, I think that's everyone. Good. So we reveal the results there, so we can see that heavily dominated by parents and carers, which is great, which is exactly the market of people we wanted to kind of make contact with and touch base with on this this webinar. So that's brilliant. And then question 2, lots of people unsure or comfortable, which is good, and a few people uncomfortable, but hopefully today's webinar will just alleviate a few of those concerns and move us more towards being comfortable or very comfortable. Okay, so lovely. Okay, so we'll start, we'll move along. We want to just remove the poll. We'll move along. So first of all, we're just going to look at what the clubs are doing in this time to prepare and what British Judo have done to prepare. So the clubs have received a safe return to judo strategy document, and that gives extensive guidance on the health and safety and also different ways in which we can deal with a different protocol in the club with dealing with accidents, injuries, as well as giving example risk assessments. And we go into quite a lot of detail on example map layouts as well, which we'll go into a little bit more detail on later on in the presentation. Something that we understand is that it's going to be different in every club. So it's down really to the clubs to notify the players and yourselves as parents, or mostly as parents, when and how you can safely return to, and what your own specific club needs will be. And part of that process will be that the club will need to complete a declaration form. So that declaration form is essentially making sure that the clubs are saying that they're going to abide by the UK government's guidelines and British Judo's guidelines relating to COVID-19 on our social distancing and hygiene requirements. So we really want to take every precaution to make sure that the clubs going back have actually made that commitment to us that they are going to follow the guidelines. Okay, so what changes can you expect at your club? So something that you need to be wary of when you return is any kind of new procedures there may be. So that might be new signage or new ways of working and operating when you attend your club, when you enter your dojo buildings. It may well be that there's a one-way system. It may well be that there's new protocol in place for spectators. Different ways of managing social areas. The social areas may be where the spectators or parents are kept whilst the session is going on to keep everyone at a social distance. And then we're also advising really that we want to limit use of toilets and change rooms. We'll go into that a little bit more later on, but it's something to be aware of when you return to the club, that there might not be, it might not just be the norm to go into changing rooms. Restriction on numbers, that will be in line with government guidelines. At the moment, we've got some ideas of numbers, but it's likely to change as the new guidelines come out. So just keep checking up on what the guidelines are for exercise. As a result of that, that's likely to impact potentially the day in which your club meet compared to how it was previously, maybe even the times of the sessions, so when they are, and also the length of the sessions to allow for cleaning. And that may impact the club's ability and capacity to cater for everybody in the way they did before. So try to have patience with your clubs through that time, and you know, we'll try and support them as much as we can as an association to give them innovative ideas in which they can try and engage with all of your membership, all of the membership throughout the week. And the other important part of that is that it may impact on cost. It may not, but with sports facilities charging the same rates and being restricted on numbers, it may mean that there's an increase in cost. So that's something to also be aware of, and really to kind of have patience with the club on, and kind of, you know, support the club through that time, because they'll have to pass on that cost. So, okay. Before you return to judo, or any judoka returns to judo, we will be implementing an indemnity form that has to be completed by everybody, and here's just an example of what that will look like. Now, ideally, this will be completed electronically, so these forms are designed to be completed electronically. Where that's not possible in certain clubs, we're asking that they incorporate it within their registration processes. So just be aware that when you go back, that is a form that we're, as an association, we're making sure that each member completes and returns to their club. That will form part of the track and trace process should anyone come into contact with the virus whilst they're at judo. So that's quite an important document. So please be aware of that and make sure that you do complete it on behalf of your child. So moving on, what does judo look like at the moment? Okay, so we've got judo outdoor training, and we've also got what many clubs have been doing, and we've been quite impressed as an association through this time with the innovation and creativity to keep their members engaged through this time. So we're seeing a lot of clubs doing online coaching and fitness using different web-based platforms, but it's important as parents you realise that that activity to be ensured, that the coach must be qualified as if they're in a normal judo situation in a dojo, and they need to have the valid BJ membership as a player, and you as a parent needs to be aware that your child is participating. Obviously, we don't want to patronise anyone, but they're the important kind of markers that go across the board in any activity. And also, specifically for indoor training, we need to make sure that there's an adequate space that's safe and removed any hazards that may be around. And then we move to what has happened since the government relaxed social distancing slightly, is that clubs have now started, some clubs have started doing some outdoor training, which is really good to see. But again, all of the criteria above must still apply for the indoor training, but we're restricted on numbers. So player coach must adhere to social distancing, and they're restricted to a maximum of group of 6, which is not just for sports activity, that's across the board for social distancing at the moment outside. So, and that includes the coach, that 6 participants. So the player and coach, we're encouraging the player and coach to practice good hygiene before, during and after the session, make sure their equipment is cleaned, make sure everyone's washing their hands regularly. So that's what's happening at the moment. So now what I'd like to do is move on to what phase one, and when we say phase one, we mean phase one of indoor judo training and what that will look like. So as said previously, there's likely to be a restriction on numbers. We can't really tell you for definite what those numbers will be at the moment. We're running on the sort of possibility of it being a maximum of 10 in the indoor session, but that's still not confirmed. So please keep an eye out for that. Or your club should be anyway, but it shouldn't be more than recommended guidance. And then that initial training will be non-contact, okay, and it will be solo individual training or with somebody from a member of the same household, okay, and that activity is going to take place on the judo mat. It will be sectioned off. So if you're lucky enough to be able to arrange your mats into a formation where you can use the colors of the mats to clearly define each mat area, each sectioned off area, and that's great. But we're obviously where that's not possible, taped off areas. And we're running on at the moment of the measurement guidance for these personally designated areas of 3x3 for under 12 and 4x4 for our over 12s. But that may change as new legislation comes out from the government. So just be aware of that. Here's just an example how that might look in practice. So on the left, you can see a mat area that's got 10 participants under 12 in 3x3 mat areas or sectioned mat areas. And then you've got a coaching zone running the length of the mat. So that just shows you how it might be spread out. And the participants will be staying within their 3x3 mat area throughout the whole session. So, and then again, looking over to the right-hand side, this is an adult layout based on the 4x4 meter. So if legislation changes, then it may well be that the adults can practice on the same way as the juniors can on this example. But as it stands at the moment, this is what we're working towards. So, okay, so what type of activity can take place? Okay, I've mentioned it previously already. Non-contact will be the main thing first of all. Remember, this is a phased approach, and this is phase one. So going back with non-contact, and it's really about introducing people back to exercise again in a fun, safe way. So it needs to be judo-specific movements, fitness activity, individual, and coaches will need to be wary of the volume and intensity of those sessions. And that's something that as an association we'll be promoting to coaches to really be mindful that the sessions are appropriate for people returning to physical activity after a period of absence. And it's another opportunity now. It's a great opportunity coming back to judo to really recap those judo-specific movements and gymnastic movements, and also our ukemi or break falls, so learning to fall safely again, just to really introduce people back in a safe way. Okay, so how can we prepare your child for judo? So we recognize that through this time, your child may be feeling anxious about returning to judo or just in general. You know, there's a lot of upheaval for everybody at the moment, and we want you to really understand that you need to come back when it's right for you and your child. There's no pressure to return as soon as legislation is lifted. So it's really important that you go back when it's right for you and your child. And if you do feel like your child is anxious and you want a bit more support, there's some really good advice on the NSPCC website that you can check out, and it's just a nice way of finding some extra support there. But what's also important, it's not just the child, it's your own mental health as well. So just be wary that even if your child's really keen to go back, you need to do what's important, you know, it's right to preserve your well-being as well. So we're mindful of that. We're not forcing anyone back into judo. We need to go when it's right for everybody, so everyone feels comfortable when they go back to their clubs. So there's another little website there for parents, and it's a great website for using physical activity as a way of managing your well-being, but it also got lots of different advice about mental health support and different mental health conditions for adults. It's aimed mainly at adults, so it's a great one for you to do. This presentation will be available to view later on, so don't worry if you miss these links. So hopefully to alleviate some of that potential worry that may exist, we've just come up with a few instructions of things to consider before you go to judo, when you're at judo, and when you leave judo. So hopefully that will help. So first of all, we're encouraging everyone obviously to practice good hygiene practices. What we mean by that is making sure that ideally the child is showered before they go to judo, but at the very least they're practicing good hand washing hygiene and potentially even feet washing hygiene. We understand, you know, that might not be possible in certain things, but we need to be as safe as we can with those procedures and following them like everyone should be anyway. We need to make sure that kit is clean before we go off to judo. Keep an eye out for guidance on specific washing temperatures and detergents to use and different ways of washing. That will be in the strategy document. That's ever changing, so keep an eye on that. We're advising to go to the toilet before you leave, and that's because we really want to minimize the use of changing rooms and toilets at the dojo and at the venue, so they're only really used in emergencies. And each facility and club will have their own different like procedures in place, so it's really important to communicate with the coaching team and the facility to make sure you know of them before you arrive. We're saying to change into kit at home so you're ready to participate when you arrive, and that's just to kind of minimize any build-up of participants in a certain area, and we can just get going as soon as the sessions begin. And then we're also advising that it might be useful to just have a basic, take their own individual basic first aid kit, and that could just be like tissues and things to try and minimize coming into contamination or coming into contact with shared equipment, essentially. So like I said, this actually has details on what that might contain. But the final one on this slide is probably the most important one, is do not attend if you've come into contact with anyone who exhibits signs of the infection. And that's a really important one. So, you know, we don't want anyone trying to be heroes. We want to keep everyone safe. So stay at home if you feel like you may have come into contact with anyone. Okay, so what happens when we get to the dojo? So when we get to the dojo, we're advising that you shouldn't have any physical contact with anyone unless they're from the same household as you, on or off the mat. Okay, so we really want to keep everyone safe. We don't want anyone shaking hands or doing any of the previous pleasantries that may have existed. And then it's awareness of new procedures. And this is all going to be different for each club. Every club is going to have a different set of ways in which to enter the building safely, ways to leave the building, all following our strategy or their own venues, facilities strategy as well as ours. So be aware of any new signage that may exist or any new ways of working that may exist. Also, wait on the instruction of the coach before you walk onto the mat area. So it's just about making sure you've had that communication with the coach, so you know where your child needs to be. They're going to be designated to their individual mat area. They're going to be told where to put their personal belongings, and that might be right next to their mat area. It might be in a designated place slightly away from where their mat area is. It's just being aware of those bits and pieces that hopefully just makes things a little bit easier when we turn up to judo. But those sorts of things will be determined by your club. So it's important to really open those lines of communication with your coaches. And if they haven't contacted you, maybe contact them just to try and gain that information from them. So what do we do now at the end of the session? So at the end of the session, we really need everyone to leave the building as soon as possible, so we don't have any gatherings or any kind of groups. So ideally avoiding going to toilets, ideally avoiding changing, because they've arrived changed. We'd ideally want them to leave changed and get cleaned at home, showered and cleaned at home. So as soon as they get home, we need to be washing all of the kits, not just their judo gi, but that could be their off-mat footwear, their zori, their flip-flops, spiders, kit bags, just giving everything a good wipe down, a good wash, just to make sure we're all sanitized and ready to go for the next session. And because we've had a long layoff, it's important as well, without wanting to patronizing again, that we refuel everyone, we make sure they're well hydrated. It's been a long time off of exercise. We need to make sure that maybe there's a little bit more rest than there was previously. It might be easier said than done with children. But, if your child or anyone your child has come into contact with exhibits signs of the infection, you must inform your club, and this is really important. It kind of goes back to the indemnity form that we spoke of previously. It's incredibly important that you inform your club so they can make everyone else aware that there may have been someone infected nearby. We can begin isolation processes. So a lot of those things will change as government guidance changes, but yeah, like I say, the contact is very important. Now, we understand that a lot of our volunteer workforce are actually our parents, and you may, as a parent volunteer, be worried about getting back into your volunteering position, and that's perfectly understandable. Now, Sport England have this week released a toolkit for clubs to be able to support their volunteers back to activity, and that's something that British Judo will be promoting over the coming weeks. So it be just, you know, we are mindful of this, and it is something we'll be trying to really engage with the clubs to make sure they're considering their volunteers. So just look out for that piece as it comes out. And like we said, it's totally understandable. You might be able to adapt your way of volunteering. You may be able to volunteer remotely to support your club. The clubs, you know, at this time more than any, need their volunteers. They need their support. So you may be able to adapt your position to still be able to offer support, but you might be able to do it from a distance. So just bear that in mind. So we've got another little poll for everyone here, just to check you're all still awake and still here. So what we'd like to ask is, how likely is it that your child will return to indoor judo when the clubs reopen? Okay, so the poll should come up shortly, and it'd be great to see where we're all at the moment. Hopefully it will come up soon. I'm hoping I'm not the only one that can't see the poll. And there we go. The poll is up for me. Hopefully it's for you. If you can start voting, yes, good. Some people can see it. Great stuff. Okay, so lots of people very likely to return so far, which is really positive to see. A few people still unsure, which is fine. So we're just, for people watching this back afterwards, because the poll results don't actually come back up on the playback. We've got 18% unsure, 29% likely, 53% very likely, and nobody is very unlikely or unlikely, which is really good to hear. So hopefully as more time passes and more guidance is released, we can convince some of the people that are unsure a little bit more. So, okay, that's great. So we'll just remove the poll and then move on. So just some useful contacts that you may or may not be aware of. If you're interested to read the Return to Judo strategy or any of the other kind of documentation that's come out from British Judo regarding COVID-19, we do have the COVID Hub on the BJ website, which is a fantastic resource, of sort of one-stop shop mini site. You can go on there and read all of the information that's the latest information that's been released, essentially. You can also contact, if you feel like you need a bit more local support, or you feel like your clubs, you want to sort of direct your clubs to get a little bit more local support from British Judo, there's the contacts through there to contact the national development officers like myself and my other colleagues, who will be able to give you a little bit more support on a local level and maybe talk you through your individual risk assessments for your club. So just be aware that that support is available. And then just heading towards the end of the presentation and such, we're just a recap of those links that we showed you previously regarding your health and well-being. Like I say, these slides will be available afterwards, or you can take a little screen grab. But yeah, like I say, we're very mindful of the well-being of our parents, volunteers, coaches, players. So these are just nice little tools to be able to signpost people to. Okay, so we're going to move along now to any questions. So Joyce, I don't know if you can we.
Hi, thanks for that, Nick. I've managed to answer most of the questions that have come through. Most of them have been around outdoor sport membership. And I'll just cover the membership situation at the moment. Anybody that keeps their membership up to date will automatically have that extended by the period of the lockdown. So once the lockdown ends, then their membership, if it's a 4-month period, then a 4-month period will be added to their membership. However, they are required to keep their membership up to date during this time as well. So that's that. There's a question that someone asked to keep for later, and this was, how will Back to Judo work for those with additional needs if only limited adults or helpers are allowed inside, as some may need additional help in special needs clubs? This is a really important area for British Judo. However, we know that a lot of clubs that we've spoken to are going to struggle generally with numbers going back. So if British Judo at the moment, we're saying it'll be 10 per session, 10 children or 10 adults per session. However, we're hoping to increase that number if the club has enough space to cater for more, and the individuals will be, if it's young people, they'll have a 3 by 3 meters, as long as the club can facilitate 3 meters by 3 meters for 10 people or 15 people, we may go to 15. The out of school sport provision is allowing for up to 15 at the moment, but that's primary age children under 13, so probably 1 year in high school as well. So in terms of the special needs, it will depend on the club and how they can facilitate it, but they do need to stick to the numbers at the moment, unless government guidelines allow us to put special measures in place for special needs, but we're still waiting for those final details to come through. I hope that answers that question.
Just to add to that point, with the special needs, we're kind of saying that phase 1 is when you can go back to indoor training, but it might not necessarily be when is best for your specific club with your specific players' needs to go back. So just bear that in mind, that phase 1 is part of a 5-phase process, and it may well be that certain groups might not go back until phase 2 or 3. Okay, so don't feel the pressure to go straight back. Do what's best for your coaches, your volunteer workforce, and your players. Okay.
Yeah. And the clubs will manage that. They're already having to manage the numbers coming through the doors. There's another question here about, will approved BJA club welfare officers be a requirement for the BJA to restart training outdoor and indoor? At the moment, the answer is no. We recommend that clubs have welfare officers, and we encourage them to have welfare officers. But at the moment, it's only a recommendation. However, going forward, I know there's moves afoot to encourage all clubs to have welfare officers, and the British Judo certainly back that. We have a question here around Scotland, and obviously my accent gives me away. I am Scottish. I'm in Scotland at the moment, and I was out this afternoon, and I've seen the under 12s and under 11s interacting up close in the playgrounds at the moment. So it's very much happening at the moment in Scotland, and I'm hoping and I'm thinking that the English government will do this, but it needs to be safe to do so, no matter what any government or any devolved parliament decide. I think safety is paramount, and certainly from British Judo's point of view, safety is also paramount going forward. So that's the questions for this evening. I don't have any more. I hope we've been able to answer them. If you have any other questions, please send them through to us, and we'll do our best to answer them. Either send them to us, or I think you've already been given, or you will be given, a link to development officers who will also help you at a local level to answer any of your questions. Thanks for that, Nick.
Yeah, thanks very much. So that just leaves us to say thank you for coming on to today's Return to Judo Safely presentation for parents. We've got a short video whilst we finish the presentation that you're welcome to log off, or you're welcome to stick around and just listen to it. So just it's by Dr. William Bird around the benefits of physical activity. It's quite an interesting little video. So we thought it'd be nice to finish the presentation with it. So feel free to hang around for that, or we'll see you next time. So thanks very much for joining us.
Our bodies are more or less the same as those of our forefathers, the hunter-gatherers. Industrial and technological revolutions happen so fast that our bodies haven't been able to catch up. We live in a world where we can spend all day not moving, and this impacts on our emotional and physical well-being. The Department of Health recommends that children do at least 60 minutes of physical activity every day. But well over half of the UK's children aged between 5 and 15 don't achieve this. As well as influence from the family, teachers and schools have a big part to play in helping children to sit less and move more, helping them to understand that physical activity is the key to a healthy and successful life. Every living thing is made of billions of cells. Inside each cell are little batteries called mitochondria. These are constantly charging up, ready to be used through physical activity. If we are inactive for too long, the mitochondria get overcharged, and this can cause inflammation in the cells. This is thought to be a significant contributor to virtually all long-term conditions. Inflammation can start in children as young as 6, so it is absolutely essential to educate and instill good habits for children to be up and active from an early age. Physical activity releases myokines into every cell of the body. These proteins dampen the inflammation. Exercise does so much good for the body and the brain. It connects more neurons together to increase brain power, and this improves concentration, creativity, and memory. Exercise can even make the brain bigger. The boost of the immune system can last up to 6 hours, so it's important to exercise regularly. An active school environment directly contributes to better behaviour and improved results. But more importantly, it creates children who move around more, who are healthier, happier, better behaved, and more engaged. Active children make strong students.